Okay, I heard this claim recently that the only way money creation, or the state creating money, can create employment, give people new jobs, is through deceiving people. And this deception is presumably the devaluation of the currency that these people would claim would happen when new money is created. So we have the government, and let's just call this the rest of society, trading, buying and selling things from each other. And they're all using a currency, like the dollar, and there is some sort of relation between the amount of money in this currency and the real goods and services in circulation. Now the government comes along, creates money, and uses that new money to demand things in the real economy. But, and this is the quantity theory, this new money creation can't increase the goods and services, the production happening. Instead, in response to it, all the economic actors, the buyers and sellers in society, raise their prices. They all raise their prices. So the additional money is matched by, not by new goods and services, but by higher prices for the existing goods and services. Now, how is this deception? Well, the government has transferred to itself, away from the population, real income. It devalues the currency, so all the money that these people have in that currency loses value in terms of real goods and services, and that value that's lost goes to the state. So this money that they created can buy the goods and services which the previously existing money supply can't, in a numerical amount, can't buy anymore. And so the deception occurs through inflation. But the problem with this is, as I said when I started this video, the claim being made is that the only way the state can create employment is through deception, which is a contradiction, because the deception occurs because there is no net increase in production. The state, by causing inflation, has devalued the money sums held by everyone else and transferred that real value to itself, that real purchasing power. But this can't create any net new employment because, for example, say if with its money, the state starts demanding more goods from this person A, than everyone else is doing, or let's say A is a business, the increase in real demand for A's production means maybe A employs, A is a businessman, runs a business, and because of the additional demand from the state, he employs a few more people, creates a few more jobs. But this purchasing power, this redirection of it through the state, means that the exact amount of extra demand for A's production has been lost somewhere else in the economy, which of course means these other groups are getting rid of employees, firing people. There's been no net job creation. So in this case, there's been deception, there's been inflation, and the deception, I suppose, is instead of the state increasing its taxes, so transferring real purchasing power to itself through taxes, it's done this secretly, deceptively, by instead what's often called tax by stealth, I think by a lot of liberals, created money and transferred purchasing power to itself through the devaluation of the currency. But there hasn't been any net job creation. So there's a contradiction here. The deception can't create jobs because the reaction, the people know they're being deceived in this scenario, and they react to that deception, inflation, by smelling in the air. Let's imagine that the money supply has lost value, or the currency has lost values. The money supply has been increased without a corresponding increase in real production and services. And so they increase their prices. So that additional nominal money supply can't affect any additional demand, real demand in the economy, because it just hits up against correspondingly increased prices. But then there's no new job creation because there's no new aggregate demand. But let's imagine that there's this thing called time. No individual actor can, when they get money as a means of payment for their goods and services, they don't know if this money is backed or not by real goods and services. You know, if you're traveling and you go from one place to another, you're going on a trip, for example. And so for these few days, instead of spending money here, you spend money here. The shops here that you spend it on don't have perfect information. They don't know that there's one extra person, one tourist in the town for these days who's going to spend money at these shops. And so when they get your money, they think, okay, today I'm receiving such amount of money more than normal because there's an extra person in the town. We live in a world of very imperfect information, of uncertainty over the future. And so while there's this idea that the market, whatever that is, a timeless thing, the market will figure out that the money supply has been increased and devalue things accordingly, this has to be, if it's true, a development in time. So this means when the government spends the money and this person, we called it person A, is being met with additional new demand, just like if you went on a trip for a few days, or to make more of a difference, maybe, let's say, you moved from one city to another, your family moved, and you start spending money regularly at certain shops, and maybe a few families move, then those shops, those businesses, are going to respond to that monetary demand, like the state's doing, by increasing their production, increasing their offer. But this means that the demand for everyone else's goods and services doesn't decrease. And in fact, because this business obviously has its own inputs, that it needs to buy more of things to produce what it produces that the government's buying more of, it needs to make more additional demand on the rest of the economy. And this is how, in this scenario, with time, there are net new jobs created because there's net additional aggregate demand. But then there can't be any inflation because this new nominal money supply, or monetary demand, let's say, has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's stimulated additional production. So now the net additional money supply, or monetary demand, has been matched with additional production in the economy. There's no basis for a loss of value of the currency in terms of goods and services. But this also means that there's no deception. No deception because no one has lost their purchasing power. The money that they had before can buy just as many goods and services, and maybe everyone's even a little richer. Maybe it's mostly helped the people who were unemployed before. They're now working, creating additional value for the economy. But of course, because of the division of labor and specialization, everyone's getting a piece of this. Of course, the businesses that are hiring these additional people are making a bit of profit, new profit that they weren't making before. And that's real because there's more goods and services, so let's say, they can just buy a bit more than they could before. Material wealth. So you have these two scenarios. The first scenario is what's called the quantity theory. The quantity theory, basically, here's a factory producing things. The quantity theory basically says there's no relation between monetary demand and production. You increase the monetary demand, you don't increase production, you just cause inflation. It's a timeless idea of how the economy works. An abstract market that doesn't exist in time. Everything's instantly adjusted. Prices are instantly adjusted for an additional money supply. And because production is something essentially in this idea uneconomic, more people are born than previously, so there's more people working. There's a technological discovery that has nothing to do with economic incentives, whether that discovery was made or not. These things just happen, it's just historical. So the production changes, but completely independently of the monetary system, the monetary supply. Scenario 2 here is a development that occurs in time. And unlike the quantity theory that just says this is what happens, there's an understandable process, a chain of events of cause and effect, which occurs in this second scenario, which makes it highly plausible. And this is that no one knows what's going to happen in the future. No one knows what's happening right now in the next person's house, what they're going to buy this afternoon, how much money they're going to spend at the shops. There can be attempts to try and find trends and predict things, but the supply and demand, let's say in a market economy, is fundamentally indeterminable. The income is indeterminable. If we go back to this, what I was saying about the quantity hypothesis, that it sort of assumes a separation between technological development, so the increase of real wealth, of how productive we are, and monetary demand. But then we can imagine what would happen in the exact same moment. To make it simple, the government created money, made this monetary demand, and some other business just happened to be introducing a innovation into its production that increased productivity, so it could produce more output with the same inputs. And so just by coincidence, this increase in monetary demand and real production happens at the same time, and so then there'd be no inflation according to the quantity theory. But the point to make here is this is happening all the time. This is completely indeterminable. It's not just innovation, it's just the decision of individuals to spend more or less, to work more or less because they want a bigger income, to do this instead of this. And so the point to make is not that, well, often money creation could not be inflationary because it's often happening to coincide with real production. The point is, the much more fundamental point is, no one has any idea what the real production of goods and services is. No one has any idea what the money supply is. No one has any idea what the real demand should be. No one has any idea if I have a magical machine in my room that prints dollars or euros or whatever, and no one can tell the difference, and I go and buy things with them. No one has any idea that I'm doing this without working. And so how should they know that when I give them the money, they know that this money is something strange about it? Whereas if someone else gives them the money, well, this person has been working, they've been producing their own goods, which backs this sum of money. No one knows that. No one knows who's moving where. The world is full of complexity. And so anyone responds to monetary demand alone. Either the money is worth something or it's not. And so you respond to it. If you exist in a society that accepts the use of a certain currency, you respond to that by, if there's competitiveness, increasing your production because there's increased demand and you want to be the one to sell that. So you increase your production to match that demand so you can sell it and make the little bit of profit off it rather than the other shop next door or whatever it might be. And what I just said gets more to the core of where inflation comes from. It has to do with power within a market. It's nothing to do with money creation or the nominal money supply. It's got to do with who, in response to demand, who has sufficient market power, for example, because they don't face competition, to raise their prices. So someone else has been doing more work, or the government creates more money to stimulate production. No one can tell the difference, but in either case, they respond to it by increasing their prices, not having to do more, but getting more from the others. And so this is the only, generally said, the situation in which government money creation could stimulate inflation, because it's being put into an economy that's completely uncompetitive or has other issues. But the point is, this has nothing to do with the money creation itself, because other people, just remove the money for a second, if you were just in a market trading, if there was a lack of competitivity, other people could actually work more, produce more of their own goods, but they don't get anything in return, because the others have maybe he's got a monopoly on some suppliers, essentially increased his prices. The others can produce more and more and more, but he can always say, no, now that you've produced more, you have to give me that more, but for the same amount as before. That has nothing to do with money.